I'm John.
And I'm Vee.
And for those that are curious if there was a technical difficulty at the beginning of this, no, it's not. Welcome to our time travel themed episode 54, everybody.
That's right, we're dealing with quantum mechanics this episode.
Oh, yes, quite a bit of quantum mechanics. I can't wait to get into both of these movies, although no 1.21 gigawatts, as Doc Brown would say.
Apologies to our audience, there are no flux capacitors in this episode this week.
No, there's not.
However, there are certainly a lot of time travel repercussions.
Most definitely. But before we get into this episode, V, did you see anything this week at the cinema?
I did. I saw 2 movies this week.
All right.
The first one was John Wick 4.
Fantastic.
Completed that series. You know, I really only liked the first one.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
The fight choreography and the stunt work is incredible. I love Keanu Reeves. I just feel like the stakes aren't there anymore, and I didn't care about the supporting characters or his motivation or quest for vengeance as much as I did in the first film.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can empathize with that.
Still entertaining as hell, still fantastic action movie, still really fun to see in the theaters, but I don't think I'd watch that movie again. And that's true for the rest of the series. I think I'd only ever watch John Wick 1 again in the future, yeah. I
get you, I do, but I think I enjoyed number 4 a little bit more. I really don't know why, but I really did. I'm planning on seeing it again in the theaters if I get around to it. So, V, tell us what your other film was this week.
Well, you and I saw this together on Monday.
Yeah, we did.
And we both had so much fun.
Oh, it was ridiculous fun.
Do you want to go ahead and tell them what we watched?
Sure. We went and saw the Nicolas Cage, Nicholas Hoult film, Renfield. And that trailer really does not do any of the movie any justice at all. And I got to say, I'm really glad because the movie was awesome.
It was gory, campy, fun without broaching the line of ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. There was actually a lot of, I don't want to say what felt real about it, but there was stuff that was totally believable happening on screen.
A lot of heart.
Lots of heart indeed. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I would definitely see that one again.
Hell yeah. I really had a lot of fun in that movie. And Nicolas Cage as Dracula is the perfect casting because he is just ludicrous enough to come across as the classic Dracula with the full cape and full Bela Lugosi style. It was perfect.
It was awesome. And the makeup was really badass in certain sequences of Renfield for sure. Like there were moments I'm like, my gosh. And it's practical effects, which is really, really cool. No, I mean, not all of them, but some of the makeup.
Yeah, the
definitely
makeup
on
team
the practical side.
Did a really great job. And it's certainly gory. I was kind of likening it to if Quentin Tarantino made a movie about Dracula in terms of violence and gore levels.
Kill Bill style splatters.
Yes, definitely.
Most definitely.
But it's a really sweet film as well. We both laughed just about the entire time.
Oh, yeah. Completely enjoyable movie from beginning to end. And everybody also was great. All supporting cast. Awkwafina was entertaining.
Yes.
And just about everybody else as well. So, definitely a great movie to see in theaters.
And I've always loved Shohreh Aghdashloo as an actress. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing her name. She's the mother in the movie.
Oh, yes. She's awesome in this movie.
I love her so much. I first saw her in 24, the series with Kiefer Sutherland. She was really good back in the early 2000s. She has a really cool, like husky voice with a really neat accent. She's also in The House of Sand and Fog with Ben Kingsley and Jennifer Connelly.
I believe so. I never saw that one.
Most recently, I have been seeing her in The Expanse, that sci-fi series. It's really good.
Oh, cool. I remember her from The Exorcism of Emily Rose and a couple of other movies as well. I've always liked her, and I really liked her character in this movie too.
Yeah, and she was also in Star Trek Beyond, the last Star Trek movie, where she's like the Commodore or Admiral, and she's advising Chris Pine about how long they've been in space and stuff like that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I did just watch Star Trek Beyond. That's right. She was in that. That's a fun movie.
It is, yeah. So Shore, she was great in Renfield too, and I'm so glad we both enjoyed it. It's just such a great theater experience.
Oh, definitely. And one other person I do want to mention, Ben Schwartz. He is Jean Ralphio in Parks and Rec. He is in this movie, and he is fucking hilarious in this movie, too.
Yes.
I've actually ran into him a few times at Griffith Park when I would go hiking when I lived in L.A., and I would have Falcor with me and his dog, and Falcor actually got along a little bit, so we just chatted. Nothing about the industry, just like, oh, look at our dogs. And he seems like a cool dude, so it was kind of cool to see him in this movie.
Yeah, and he is great. I agree. He's great in this movie.
Definitely.
And John, you saw another movie this week too, didn't you?
I did. I actually saw it right after we saw Renfield. It was a little bit after that. I went and had a beer, and I was like, you know what? My wife's got a friend over. I'm going to let them have the house for the next couple hours. So I went and saw the new Russell Crowe flick, The Pope's Exorcist, which I thought was good. I didn't think it was fantastic. It was very formulaic. It was very much what you'd expect from an exorcism movie. But Russell Crowe was good, and it had some disturbing moments. And overall, if anybody wanted to see it again and invite me, I would go, but I don't know if I would go out of my way to see it again. But I say that only because I would likely watch it at home. And again, it was an enjoyable movie, but I liked Renfield a little bit more. It wasn't, obviously, The Pope's Exorcist was based on a true story and, about exorcism and stuff like that. And I like movies about exorcism. I'm very fascinated by it. So I did enjoy the movie, but it wasn't like something that I left the theater being like, hell yeah, that was one of my favorite movies. You know what I mean?
Totally. And did Russell Crowe have a better accent in this movie than in Thor: Love and Thunder?
Oh, actually, most definitely. Yes. Yeah.
So it had that going for it.
Yeah, Russell Crowe was good. I liked him. I usually do like Russell Crowe. I unless, it's Les Miserables. But other than that, or Love and Thunder, but majority of the time, Russell Crowe's I'm down with.
So those are the movies we watched this week in theaters, and our various levels of recommendations for them. And so now I think we can get into our theme this week, which is time traveling.
Yeah. Yes, let's do it.
With Bruce Willis.
Yes. Bruce Willis doubling up today. And I believe I go first on this 54th episode of Movies You Missed podcast.
I believe you do. Take it away.
All right. For those that were following along with us this week, I'm curious if anybody watched it. So when we do post on social media, or if you've seen it, I would love to know what your thoughts are. I love this movie. This movie's from 1995, although it was also released in 1996. It was released very limitedly in December of 1995. Then it got its wide release in January of 1996.
Interesting.
This movie stars Bruce Willis, Madeline Stowe, Brad Pitt, Christopher Plummer, David Morse, and Christopher Maloney. This is directed by Terry Gilliam, written by David Webb Peoples and Janet Peoples. If anybody remembers that name from a very earlier episode that we've done here at Movies You Missed podcast, David Webb Peoples was the screenwriter on my favorite Western with Clint Eastwood, Unforgiven. So we have that going for this film, which is titled 12 Monkeys. And if I haven't said it already, directed by Terry Gilliam. This film... Where in the hell do you begin?
Right?
My gosh. Again, like I said, 95 and 96 this movie came out. I had not seen this movie until I was about 10 years old. I think I was about 10 or 11.
What the shit?
Yeah, my dad showed me this movie.
Oh my God.
The first thing I ever saw of 12 Monkeys, I was at a video rental store in Palmdale, California, and 12 Monkeys was on TV. And it was a scene that I'm just only going to talk about now because it doesn't really pertain necessarily to anything deep in the story. Bruce Willis eats a spider. And V, I'm sure you remember that sequence.
Uh-huh.
That was the first I ever saw of 12 Monkeys. And my dad was like, oh, hey, John, that movie's 12 Monkeys. I was telling you about it, that it was really crazy and Brad Pitt was really good in it. And I was like, oh, cool. And he goes, yeah, but it's R-rated, so don't look at the screen.
But I'm going to show it to you.
Okay, so I stopped looking at it, and I remember the clerk at the video store going, should we pause it until you guys leave? And my dad's like, no, don't worry about it. It's fine. So that was my first introduction to 12 Monkeys, was watching Bruce Willis eat a spider.
Which is weird because this week we saw Renfield, which is all about him eating bugs.
That's all about him eating bugs, right? Yeah. That's hilarious. I love that bit about Renfield, too. He just like pulls out the little coffin and chews down the spiders or the bugs.
Which is a classic
cool
part of the Dracula story when they include Renfield. I always remember his assistant needing to eat bugs in order to get his powers.
Right. Yeah. So a few years later, fast forward, my dad and I are at home, and he goes, hey, you want to watch 12 Monkeys? And I was like, yeah, it's R-rated. Dad's going to let me watch a movie that's R-rated. Mom's out of the house. Let's do it. So we watched 12 Monkeys. Again, it had to have been like late 96, early 97. So I'm like 11 or 12 years old, right? I am just like completely sitting there like, what the hell is going on in this movie? And only within the first 15 minutes, that's what you're doing. But then for the next 2 hours, you're saying the same thing because it's just one of those incoherent, non-linear storylines of a movie. And for those that don't know what 12 Monkeys is about, here's a little bit of a breakdown without any spoilers for you. 12 Monkeys is set in the year 2035. Humans have abandoned the surface of the planet because of a virus in 1996 that wipes off 5 billion people. The human race has almost gone extinct because of this virus. We are introduced to Bruce Willis's character. His name is James Cole. He is now considered a volunteer. James is being told that he's going to be sent back in time to the year 1996, just a few weeks after this virus has wiped off these 5 billion people. And he's going to go to the surface to collect samples, different bugs, and to make sure that the air is breathable again so that they can start bringing people back to the surface. Now, mind you, again, this is set in 2035, and now we're back to 1996. So James is now being sent back 40 years into the past to 1996. Something ends up happening to James where he is now in the year 1990. Unfortunately, he's kind of getting a little fucked in the head because, of course, I mean, who the hell knows what time travel does to the human mind? Yeah. We don't know. It doesn't exist. Unless it does, and we just don't know about it.
It just doesn't exist yet.
It doesn't exist yet. That's my hope as well. So James Cole is very unfortunately arrested and told that he is out of his mind, completely insane. He's thrown into a mental institution in the year 1990. He's got to figure out a way to get out, and he's also still got to figure out a way to collect these samples to trace the path of this virus so that the scientists in the year 2035 can abolish this virus and bring the human race back to the surface of the planet, which is now being overrun again by the animals. And the beginning of this movie actually opens with an excerpt saying, 5 billion people will die of a virus in 1996. The human race will abandon the surface of the earth. Animals will once again rule the planet. It says paranoid schizophrenic 1990. So you're like, what the hell? Then we are treated to what I just explained to you. In just, it's such a dystopian, steampunkish, like mind fuck of a movie. And when I first saw this as a kid, I was so completely blown the fuck away.
How did you keep track of this, though?
Oh my God. I really don't know, V, because I'm going to tell you right now, as I watch this as I get older, not only is it even more terrifying than it was as a kid, because you're just like so fascinated with the time travel aspect and, the fact that there's no other people on the planet, but that at the same time, when he's going back in time, he's with, Catherine Rayleigh, who's played awesomely by Madeline Stowe. She ends up being his psychiatrist that he oversees James Cole when he's in the institution.
In 1990.
In 1990, yeah. And it's very interesting, like all these other movies where there's time travel and like memories that, are being shoved into your brain after maybe, the butterfly effect kind of thing. I love how she looks at him in 1990. She goes, have I met you somewhere? Is there, some place that I know you from? And he's like, no, that's impossible. You're dead. I'm from 2035 and this is supposed to be 1996. She goes, well, that's the future, James. Do you think you're living in the future? And he goes, what do you mean? This is 1996. She goes, no, this is 1990. So right there, that's like one of already so many just like mind-boggling, like, like your brain is just getting splattered against the wall as you watch this movie.
This is October, right?
April.
What year is this?
What year do you think it is?
1996.
That's the future, James. Do you think you're living in the future?
1996 is the past.
No, 1996 is the future. This is 1990.
He's in the institution. He meets this crazy character, Jeffrey Goins, played Oscar-nominated, worthy, of course, by Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt was relatively unknown when he got cast in this movie because they shot this movie in early 1995, and Terry Gilliam really wasn't sure if he was going to be able to nail the character and the very anxiety-ridden paranoia of somebody that isn't necessarily, quote-unquote, a very well-known actor. At the time of this movie coming out, Interview with the Vampire, Legends of the Fall, and Seven had just come out. So it was one of those moments where he became like a bankable star overnight while working on fucking 12 Monkeys, which is nuts.
1990s Brad Pitt was a phenomenal actor.
Oh, yeah. I love Interview with the Vampire. I think that movie's badass.
I love that movie, too. I like the books.
Yeah. Oh, I've never read the books. I've
they're
almost read one of Anne Rice's books, but I've never been able to finish it. And not because I was bored. I just never did finish it.
And in the last 20 years or so, he's been doing less movies that make him stretch as an artist. Mm-hmm. And so for anyone who only has experienced 2000s Brad Pitt or 21st century Brad Pitt, go back and watch some of his films in the 90s. You will see that he is a very talented actor, and this is the best I've ever seen him.
Oh, yeah. No, 12 Monkeys is his shining moment, most definitely. It's insane how good he is and how hilarious he is and how scary he is.
He's
in this
so
movie.
fucking scary in this movie.
Yeah, it's nuts.
But this movie also in general terrifies me from start to finish.
Oh, yeah. 12 Monkeys is, like I said last week, this is not a sci-fi thriller. 12 Monkeys is a horror movie in every sense of the word. So as James Cole is in the mental institution, he meets Jeffrey.
I guess they give you some chemical restraints, huh? Drugs! What did they give you? Thorazine? Haldol? How much? Learn your drugs. Know your doses. It's elementary.
I need to make a telephone call.
Telephone call? That's communication with the outside world. Doctor's discretion. Hey, all of these nuts could just make phone calls. They could spread. Insanity oozing through telephone cables, oozing to the ears of all these poor, sane people, infecting them. Wackos everywhere, plague of madness.
Come on, let's go.
In fact, very few, Jim. Very few of us here are actually mentally ill. I'm not saying you're not mentally ill. For all I know, you're crazy as a loon. But that's not why you're here. That's not why you're here. It's not why you're here. You're here because of the system.
He ends up escaping, and the crazy part about his escapes are he's just being plucked out of the past from the scientists in the future to, follow up with him as to what he's been doing. Although it's not really working out.
They suck.
They really do kind of suck because they haven't been sending him to the right place.
No,
and that's
not
one of
at
those
all.
revelations of the movie where, he's like, oh, I was in a mental institution. Like, mental institution? Like, he goes, yeah, the year was 1990, and they're like, 1990? Like, what the hell? And there's a line in this movie, I think it's said several times, that science ain't an exact science. And
I
it's
love
like,
that
ooh.
line.
You do the job. You find out the big info. Army of the 12 Monkeys.
It's supposed to be 1996.
Science ain't an exact science with these clowns, but they're getting better. You're lucky you didn't end up in ancient Egypt.
Ooh, yeah, especially with the time travel, because not only does he get sent to the wrong time to 1990 instead of 1996, he does get sent elsewhere. And when he does get sent elsewhere, there's so many different revelations in this movie that just blow you away. And again, we do not do spoilers here. So I really cannot give this audience of ours anything else of 12 Monkeys except for the amazing trivia that I have and to just discuss some more of my absolute fucking love for this movie. Because I have been watching this movie for over 25 years now, and every time I watch it, it takes on a completely different meaning for me. Like I said last week, I watched this movie just around when the pandemic lockdown was lifted. It was calling my name. It was like 12 Monkeys. And right when I put it on and that opening accordion soundtrack starts, chills just go down my spine. I love the way this movie opens.
You psychopath. I cannot imagine watching this movie anywhere near around COVID. I mean, even now to watch it this week.
Yeah.
And that's the crazy thing. So my sister introduced me to this film when I was a teenager in the late 90s. It had come out on VHS.
Yeah.
And she was like a senior in high school. And so I was in my mid-teens. And I just remember it being so dystopian, so depressing.
Very.
And so traumatizing and intense.
Yeah.
This movie, similar to a lot of Terry Gilliam movies, is just really fucked up.
Oh, yes.
In a psychological way. It reminded me a lot of like Requiem for a Dream in a lot of ways,
Okay.
by Darren Aronofsky that I covered.
Yeah.
It's just a very dark movie. It's a fantastic movie.
Sure. Yeah.
It is a fabulous piece of art. And I do
Yes.
say that seriously. This is artistic.
Yeah.
This is crafted incredibly well from start to finish. But it is so fucking depressing and intense because especially nowadays, you're like, wow,
Oh, yeah.
this could absolutely happen. Awesome.
Yeah, I know. It's really nuts. It is. It's terrifying. It's a horror movie more than a sci-fi thriller. The sci-fi comes in with the time, travel, and the thriller comes in with
So
everything
much
else.
tension.
but- yeah.
Tension in this movie. And
There really is, yeah. And it's amazing how it builds from the beginning,
Yeah.
and it doesn't, when we're introduced to James Cole, he's in that cage, and he's talking to
God, yeah.
Jose next to him, and he goes, "Hey, man, they just called your name." And he goes, "I didn't volunteer." And then the wide shot is some guy being lifted out by a crane, and then his cage opens, and then he gets pulled out. And it's just like, what the fuck is going on? And then you find out that he, is actually kind of in prison at the same time because he's a bit of a hothead. Again, the fact that, it's set in 2035, you see where the technology kind of stopped because in 1996, this virus did wipe out 5 billion people and technology was at a standstill. So everything that's used is almost that Star Wars effect. It's like it's been used in the past and they're using it now in the future, quote unquote, but it's still so not even near advanced as it should be. And I just love the interrogation scenes in this movie when Bruce Willis is in that chair and they have that hydraulic ball with all those screens on it looking at him. That shit always has been in my brain since I was a kid. And it's always freaked me out. It just reminds me of just one of the weirdest surrealistic nightmares. It's it reminds me of a Franz Kafka novel, and I don't know if you've ever read Franz Kafka.
Mm-mm.
He writes very surrealistic, very fever dream type of imagery, and there's a book by him called The Trial that fucked me up, and that's kind of what 12 Monkeys kind of reminds me of now that I've actually have a Kafka book read. It reminds me very Kafka-esque-ish with the imagery and the dialogue even.
Oh, okay, yeah. And it's funny you bring up those interrogation scenes because they kind of reminded me of Source Code.
Yeah, a little bit, didn't they?
Yeah.
Right, yeah, because he's in that one kind of furnace type of thing with the screen. Yeah. Interesting.
And they keep bringing him back in time, back to the present time, and they're
that's
like,
right.
"Dude, have you done this?" And he's like, "What the fuck? You keep sending me to the wrong time."
Whoa, that's so crazy. That's interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of parallels with 12 Monkeys and Source Code. Very cool. I'm going to have to tell some people that. Well, here we go. We're telling them now. I love that. That's great. I didn't even think of that. That's awesome, V. Hell yeah. Now, I mentioned earlier that Gilliam was a little worried about Brad Pitt not being able to get that anxiety-ridden, fast speech. He ended up sending him to a speech coach that ultimately did not help either. But at the time, Brad Pitt was smoking cigarettes. So on days that they would shoot, Terry Gilliam would pluck his packet of cigarettes, and lo and behold, Jeffrey Goins was born.
Oh, because he had anxiety about not smoking, and so he just
he had his anxiety about not smoking.
twitching
The twitches, everything.
Oh, wow!
He was obviously a little bit exaggerated, accentuated.
Of course.
However,
that kicked it off.
Yeah, kicked it right off. I thought that was pretty crazy.
Awesome.
And again, Oscar-nominated performance.
Cigarettes are bad.
Cigarettes are bad. Gilliam and Bruce Willis had been wanting to work together for a while. Bruce Willis actually auditioned for The Fisher King, which is another great Terry Gilliam movie, which is also pretty fucked up, with Robin Williams. And Bruce Willis and Terry Gilliam unfortunately didn't work together in Fisher King, but they ended up getting to work together here because the studio wanted a bankable star for this movie. It kind of sat in development hell for a little bit. The budget that they wanted for it was just under $30 million. They wanted about a $29 million budget for the movie, and they wanted Bruce Willis to star. And Gilliam, like I said, has always wanted to work with Bruce Willis and vice versa. And Gilliam has always said that the reason why he's always wanted to work with Bruce Willis was because of the moment in Die Hard when he's plucking the glass off his feet and talking about how much he loves his wife. And when Bruce Willis told him about that scene and how it was completely improvised, Terry Gilliam was like, well, then I think you can definitely act in a movie of mine. And lo and behold, here we go.
Hell
12
yeah,
Monkeys.
he did.
Yeah,
God,
fucking awesome.
He was incredible in this movie, too. Everybody's
so
good in
good.
this movie.
Yeah, everybody is. Everybody. Every supporting actor. Like I brought up Christopher Maloney because everybody might know who he is. I think
Hell
he's on
yeah.
one of the Law and Order shows.
Law and Order SVU. He is Detective Stabler. He is a total daddy. Been a big fan of him since 1999 when SVU premiered.
Nice. He is one of my favorite characters in Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. He plays Freak Show, and if anybody's seen Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, you would know, because that character is hilarious.
And he also is the Colonel in the Zack Snyder Superman movie. He talks to Henry Cavill a lot. Yeah, and he ends up being in that plane trying to fight off Zod.
Oh, I do not remember that.
That's okay. That movie isn't good.
No, it's not. It's not at all. One thing that actually elevated Bruce Willis's performance in this movie was that Terry Gilliam gave him a list of Bruce Willisisms not to do while making this movie, including the steely blue-eyed look, which I guess I've seen. I don't know if I have or not, but I thought that was pretty hilarious.
So similar to The Rock in Jumanji, Smolder Brainstone.
Yes. This is one of the more famous pieces of trivia that a lot of people might have heard if you've seen 12 Monkeys or even seen the making of 12 Monkeys. There's a 2-part documentary on the DVD called The Hamster Factor. Terry Gilliam's nickname became Hamster Factor on set because... So when James Cole comes back from the past, he takes his own blood at one point, and there's a very big wide shot. And in that wide shot, if you were to look to your screen's right, there would be a hamster wheel and a bunch of little hamsters. Well, a lot of times it would take maybe a couple hours to shoot a scene like this. Well, not with Terry Gilliam and not on this day, because the hamsters would not run on the wheel. So it took them a half a day to get this shot, because Terry Gilliam is a very, very well-known perfectionist when it comes to his direction in his feature films. And he got Final Cut for this movie, so he was shooting footage like you wouldn't believe. I thought it was hilarious that they named the documentary and his nickname was The Hamster Factor. And that cost a shit ton of money, by the way.
Oh, I'm sure. And I am really impressed that he got Final Cut on this movie. And thank God, because I can only imagine the editing that a distributor or a production company would have insisted for this movie.
Seriously.
And it would not have been as good at all.
Well, it's amazing you say that, because that's why he and Universal clashed before when they made Brazil together. He was supposed to get Final Cut. The studio said they wouldn't cut Brazil, and they did anyway, and that just completely and royally pissed off Terry Gilliam. So he was not going to work with Universal again, but they approached him after everybody during that little fiasco ended up leaving, and that's why he ended up taking the job for 12 Monkeys.
So... You're telling me that there's a Terry Gilliam cut of Brazil that's probably more fucked up.
There is. Yeah, there probably is.
Oh
I actually haven't seen Brazil. That's one of the ones that I have not seen of Terry Gilliam's, but I've heard that it's one of his best movies that he's ever done.
It's the only other Terry Gilliam movie I've seen. I've heard of The Fisher King. I've heard that Robin Williams is amazing in it, but Brazil is... Oh my God! Yeah, it's you would probably like it. Let's put it that way.
I probably would. Yeah, I imagine there is a Gilliam cut somewhere. But yeah, the studio went behind his back and recut Brazil after production and post production wrap. So yeah, really really lame. But he got Final Cut for this, and thank God he did. And another reason, like I had mentioned earlier, they wanted Bruce Willis. Nick Nolte was first choice for James Cole, which in the '90s, Nick Nolte, maybe. I don't know. I can't see it with his voice, like the way it is. I love Nick Nolte in Tropic Thunder. Gotta mention Tropic Thunder again.
He's really good more recently in the movie Warrior with Tom Hardy.
Oh, I never did see Warrior.
Yeah,
I heard that was a good
one. It's good.
Oh, nice. Jeff Bridges was another choice of Gilliam's, but the studio wanted to go with a bigger star, which is interesting because I guess Jeff Bridges in the early 90s, I mean, Big Lebowski hadn't come out just yet. But oddly enough...
That whole family was so famous at that point.
Right, yeah.
That's interesting.
I don't know.
I can't picture him in it doing this role. But...
No, I can't either. It's funny, yeah, in a pseudo-universe, I was thinking about it, and I was like, I don't think I could do Jeff Bridges' voice as James Cole, and I don't think I can do Nick Nolte's voice as James Cole. There's something to be said about Bruce Willis in the way that he can be soft at the same time as hard, and I could see Jeff Bridges kind of doing that, but Nick Nolte is hard all the time.
No.
So, it's kind of like...
He's got a bit of a menacing characteristic to him.
Yeah, not as innocent looking.
Yeah, Bruce Willis has this innocence where Jeff Bridges could pull that off in the 90s, especially think of Seabiscuit. I think that's a good example of him being wholesome. But I've never seen him in a movie where there's this lack of control that James Cole needed in 12 Monkeys.
Yeah.
Jeff Bridges has kind of a cool factor to him, or at least this kind of underlying sleek factor where you're like, oh, he's totally in control of himself or this situation. Like, no, even as the dude, he was in control because he didn't give a shit, right?
Right.
And he was just so chill about everything. Whereas James Cole's character in 12 Monkeys is so out of control the entire time.
Right, yeah.
That's why I don't think that casting would have worked.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Another actor, this one kind of made no sense to me. Maybe because it was the 90s, but Sylvester Stallone was considered for James Cole. I can't.
The
from
only
1996, from the future. No,
the only
can't do it.
good time travel Sylvester Stallone movie that could ever be made is Demolition Man.
There we go. Yeah. Which I actually have never seen. I gotta see that one still in my life.
It's one of my guilty pleasure action movies. I'm sure it'll be on the list at some point.
Perfect, yes. And another one, likely because it was the 90s and, Goodfellas came out in the 90s, Casino came out in the 90s, Robert De Niro was offered the role for James Cole. And in a way, like I've seen Awakenings, I've seen Analyze This, I've seen him definitely have a bit of a range. However, I don't think so.
No.
It's like, it's
too
of course
action-oriented.
It's too action oriented, and I feel like nobody would believe that Robert De Niro would also believe that he was from the future. I don't know, it's like there's something about De Niro that it's like, nah, you know what, mob and high society type movies, that's your thing,
Yeah,
like,
again,
stick with that.
There's this vulnerability factor that Bruce Willis could carry in this movie that Robert De Niro, I don't think would.
I completely agree with you. And here's another weird casting, which in a pseudo-universe, I might want to see this one, only because I've been a fan of his for a long time, and I do like majority of his work. Johnny Depp was up for Jeffrey Goins, and I feel like 90s Johnny Depp could have pulled that off, but at the same time, I've seen this movie so many times that I can't see anybody else but Brad Pitt doing this role. And it's crazy how insane Brad Pitt is in this movie. And I know we've talked about it already, but kind of like nowadays where he always eats in movies. He didn't really have a thing back then, except for his character liked to chew on his middle fingernail and like flip everybody off. And I thought that was like one of those hilarious tics that it was just such a fascinating character trait, along with this eye, cockeyed eye that he had, which was a hand-painted contact lens. And this, I just love the close-up shots of him, like when he's like, "We're all monkeys," or like he's looking at the camera and he's like, "Monkeys!" Like it's just like,
so
my God,
creepy.
the soullessness behind the eyes of Jeffrey Goins. It is. I don't know how he fucking achieved it. I don't know how he did it. I don't know how, because I look into him now and I'm like, no
way. Yeah. No. But that is why I don't think Johnny Depp could have done it. He does not have a creepiness factor. He has a kooky factor.
Right.
Totally different.
Would have been a completely different Jeffrey Goins.
Yeah, absolutely. And you wouldn't have been able to take it as seriously. It wouldn't have been as menacing. It wouldn't have been as anxiety-inducing. This movie is full of just intense evil. It's so dark. Johnny Depp can't do dark like that.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's interesting you say that because I remember watching The Ninth Gate and being like, this is not a good movie.
Exactly.
And I remember it's not supposed to be like a horror or anything like that, but at the same time, very, very interesting that he was up for it. And like I mentioned earlier, it's very steampunkish, retro-futuristic technology. The technology stopped in 96, so a lot of the TVs are still black and white because they still were. You have those little portable TVs before laptops. Tube TVs, yeah, it's crazy. Just the costumes in this movie also, like especially the time travel costume that he wears in the beginning of this movie is so nuts. And this movie was nominated not for one but 2 Oscars, and the other Oscar nomination was for Best Costume Design for 12 Monkeys. Yeah,
well deserved,
and very well deserved. Yeah, and it's just so meticulously well done, this movie, and it's crazy too because at the end it all makes sense. It's not like you're like, wait a minute, kind of like how Nolan likes to give us these days. But at the same time you're kind of like, wait a minute, wait.
No, this is not an open-ended movie.
No.
Like you said, unlike Christopher Nolan's movies. This is a very definitive movie, and it wraps itself up very, very well.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, again, another reason why I think this movie is exceptional.
Definitely. I completely agree. The DP for this movie was named Roger Pratt. He DP'd a shit ton of movies that I really like, so it was very exciting to do a little research on this gentleman. He DP'd this movie, which we're talking about. He DP'd my favorite Harry Potter movie, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. That is the 4th one in the series. I absolutely love Goblet of Fire. It's the first one I saw in theaters. Love that fucking movie. And then I think it's Order of the Phoenix, where Voldemort and Dumbledore battle in the hall of the Ministry hallway or whatnot. Oh, I will watch Order of the Phoenix just for that 9-second shot. I love that fucking shot of
that
them
whole fight
wand
scene
battling.
is badass.
So killer.
Yeah.
So Goblet of Fire, Roger Pratt did another Brad Pitt movie with Eric Bana and Orlando Bloom and Brian Cox called Troy, which I am a fan of. I know a lot of people panned that movie, but I liked Troy.
Myself
I thought it was
included.
quite epic. Wolfgang Peterson directed that one. He also DP'd Inkheart with Brendan Fraser, which I thought was pretty good. Another one of those book-to-life type movies. Roger Pratt also DP'd another Harry Potter movie, The Chamber of Secrets, so he did the second one and then the fourth one, which was pretty awesome. He DP'd The Fisher King for Terry Gilliam, DP'd Brazil for Terry Gilliam, DP'd Meaning of Life, Monty Python's Meaning of Life for Terry Gilliam and all the other directors that directed sequences for any Monty Python. And Roger Pratt, V, you'll like this one, he DP'd Batman 1989 with Michael Keaton, directed by Tim Burton. Yeah, very, very cool. Now, one thing I like also about Bruce Willis that I've always liked about him is he is a lefty, like myself, and V as well. So here we are, southpaws all together, and Bruce Willis was very adamant that James Cole be a lefty in this movie because he does write a couple of things to Catherine Rayleigh early on in the movie, and he uses his left hand, which was pretty sweet. One other thing I will talk about before getting into the locations and the budget for 12 Monkeys. Like I mentioned before, the ball in the interrogation sequences was one of the most problematic pieces of props on the set of 12 Monkeys. Every day, it would screw up with electronic issues, with hydraulic issues. A couple times it almost fell on Bruce Willis's lap. A couple times it almost fell on Terry Gilliam's head. And in The Hamster Factor, there are several moments in that documentary where they're standing around in that room and Terry Gilliam is just screaming fuck at the top of his lungs because that hydraulic ball does not work the way that he wants it to. Because, of course, he's a perfectionist, so inanimate objects got to listen too, right?
Yeah, God, I can only imagine something like that would piss him off so badly.
Yeah, it would piss me off too. Kind of like we talked about before, know your lines. Come on, props, getting with it. Fucking A.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting we're talking about this, though, because there are a lot of times where we talk about directors who are tyrannical.
Right.
Or just straight up assholes.
Yes.
And then there are other times we talk about directors like Terry Gilliam who are very much perfectionists.
Yeah.
James Cameron kind of falls in both camps.
Definitely.
Depending on who you ask.
Yes.
And being on set, I'm so torn by whether or not I would respect a guy like Terry Gilliam. He makes an incredible product.
Yeah.
But he also makes a set miserable in so many ways.
Yeah, it's tough.
And the fact that movies are not only art, but also a job...
Yeah.
It's hard to not take pause and be like, well, look, he makes great movies, but he's also kind of a prick.
Yeah.
It
is. Yeah, it's tough, but that's the entertainment industry. I mean, I think that's
of
everything
course.
though.
That's true.
That's literally, but that's every job that I've ever had before the entertainment industry, same thing, like you're directing, you're, the manager, you want things to go a certain way and they don't, of course, that's going to suck. And I've seen it all too many times on set. The gun jammed or special effects didn't get the walkie cue, or stunts didn't get the cue to hit the gas and so the car doesn't get hit. There's so many things, of course, that can go haywire on set. So I completely empathize with that. But at the same time, I'm on the spectrum of, if it were me and I had that kind of money and I had final cut of a movie, we're going to be here all goddamn day
right.
until we can get it fucking right. And the cool thing is, I mean, Terry Gilliam brought this movie under budget, so it was kind of insane.
And I guess my point is that you can be a brilliant director or a brilliant manager and produce incredible things without being an asshole. And I'm hoping that you can tell me whether or not people have a good experience with Terry Gilliam, because I haven't heard anything good or bad about him.
Oh,
and,
sure.
I think we've really opened this conversation when we did start talking about James Cameron, because you can be a perfectionist without being an asshole. And I guess that was the point I was trying to get at, is he just makes brilliant movies. I'm wondering if, even though he's a perfectionist, the sets are still fun to be on.
Sure. I didn't find a whole lot about 12 Monkeys. Suffice to say that everybody in the documentary says, he's an intense guy to work for, but we're excited for the product and very excited for the opportunity to work with him. So I can take that. And this is my second Terry Gilliam movie actually on the podcast, because I did do The Brothers Grimm. And there was a lot of talk
Speaking of not having final cut.
Right. Yes, exactly. And he was a little bit of a bully to Lena Headey on the set of The Brothers Grimm. So, again, I don't really know what else to say except people have their days, but at the same time, there is that gray area. It's like, well, yeah, he kind of was a prick to so-and-so, but, the movie's great or whatnot. The performance is great. So it's like Terry Gilliam and Benicio del Toro. They clash so much on Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas that, they almost didn't end up talking to each other for the rest of the production. But Terry Gilliam is on record saying that it's one of his most favorite performances he's ever directed because of the choices that Benicio del Toro made.
Right.
And if anybody's seen Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, that movie is another masterpiece, of drug cinema. And I will likely have that on the list as well at some point in the future, because I've read the book. I've read so much Hunter S. Thompson that I don't know how many times I've watched that movie. And I'm just about finished. I just want to get into the budget a little bit, and then we'll do highest of 96, and then we'll jump into V's. The budget, like I actually did mention earlier, if anybody remembers, $29 million. That was how Gilliam was able to get final cut, get hired for the movie. He was able to bring the budget down to $29 million. Had a release limitedly December 29th of 1995. Wide release on January 5th of 1996. The U.S. gross for 12 Monkeys was $57.1 million in its theatrical run, which is pretty damn good. The worldwide box office, V, why don't you take a guess for 1996 for 12 Monkeys, what the worldwide box office was?
$128 million.
$168.8 million. So 12 Monkeys did very well. It made a whole shit ton of its money back, and Terry Gilliam was in good standings with Universal after that. And the cool thing is, my pick did scratch the top 25 highest grossing films of 1996, coming in at number 22.
Oh, great.
I know. Shot all over Philadelphia, Baltimore, and a little bit in Montreal. They started shooting in February of 95, wrapping in May of 95, so it was only about a 2.5-month shoot. And all the locations are practical. They did not have any sound stages for any of this shit.
What?
Yeah, so every location you see is practical, and it's just
did
amazing.
not see that coming.
I didn't either, because when I was reading this and watching the documentary, I'm like, wait a minute, they have not been on a soundstage, and they haven't been on a studio lot. They were literally all over practical locations to make 12 Monkeys.
Wow, that's cool.
Yes. And that's 12 Monkeys, everybody. If you have not seen it, you can stream it on Peacock if you have the unlimited subscription, I believe what it is. I have my DVD copy. You can also rent it on Apple for $3.99. If you aren't too terrified about movies with time travel or viruses that wipe out just about everybody on the planet, give it a shot, because it is a fantastic film, and I'm glad V also thinks it is. Doubt V will watch it ever again, but I will. So, yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed it, and I hope that you might check it out if you haven't seen it.
Well, maybe I'll watch it another 20 years or so.
There you go.
It is incredible, but it was so impactful that I actually still remembered almost all of this movie since the last time I saw it in the 90s, because it's that good and that intense. Yeah. And there is a very fascinating debate in this movie about humanity's destruction that I thought was still timely to this day. There is a debate between whether there is going to be some apocalyptic event or humanity's gradual destruction of the environment is going to be the thing that kills us all off. And I just thought, wow, even more than 25 years ago, this was a debate that's happening. Is so fascinating.
It very much is, yes. And before we go off this one, I'm sure you might have caught this moment when Catherine Rayleigh is signing books at her book reading. The guy that we first see, the first extra, he goes, "I'm going out to get vaccinated right now." Because she's talking about all these different plagues and all this stuff after her book just came out. That's a little out of context for our audience. However, it's still worth mentioning because it was funny.
Well, especially nowadays, definitely relevant.
Yes, exactly. So I think we should shoot on over to your pick, V. What do you think?
Let's loop back around to having me describe a movie. Now, I just happened to pick another Bruce Willis-led time travel movie. I really only originally picked a time travel movie. It just happens that Bruce Willis is in both of these, but it actually is a icing on top of this cake of time traveling, because Bruce Willis is awesome and we're both big fans.
Hell yes.
And in fact, he isn't the number one lead in the movie I picked. Because I picked the 2012 Rain Johnson, Joseph Gordon-Levitt-led Looper.
Hell yeah.
I saw this movie in theaters.
As did I.
I was really impressed from the first time I saw this movie.
Oh yeah, this movie is badass.
And I'm actually going to do something a little different this week because Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who is a wonderfully talented success story of a child actor, actually.
Yeah, big time.
Has a couple of really great monologues in the beginning of this movie. There's a lot of times in movies where I'm not really happy when they tell instead of show. I really like exposition that's pretty natural, similar to, us talking about How High last week.
Yeah.
But he does a really great job, and this movie opens up very well. I do like these monologues, and so the first monologue that I want to play for our audience is him describing the state of the world and his role within it.
Nice. Here we go.
Time travel has not yet been invented, but 30 years from now, it will have been. It will be instantly outlawed, used only in secret by the largest criminal organizations. It's nearly impossible to dispose of a body in the future, I'm told. Tagging techniques, whatnot. So when these criminal organizations in the future need someone gone, they use specialized assassins in our present called loopers. And so, my employers in the future nab the target. They zap him back to me, their looper. He appears, hands tied and head sacked. And I do the necessaries. Collect my silver. So the target has vanished from the future, and I've just disposed of a body that technically does not exist. Clean.
So now we know that we are taking place in the future, and things are pretty intense, and he is kind of a bad guy. He certainly works for bad people.
Yes, indeed he does.
But there's a catch to this job that offers tons and tons of money. And that is where the title of this movie comes in. Because there is a term called closing the loop.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason we're called loopers. When we sign up for this job, taking out the future's garbage, we also agree to a very specific proviso. Time travel in the future is so illegal that when our employers want to close our contracts, they'll also want to erase any trace of their relationship with us ever existing. So if we're still alive 30 years from now, they'll find our older self, zap him back to us, and we'll kill him like any other job. This is called closing your loop. And you get a golden payday, you get a handshake, and you get released from your contract. Enjoy the next 30 years. This job doesn't tend to attract the most forward-thinking people.
So from the get-go, this movie, similar to yours, is a bit dystopian. It's a bit depressing. It's a bit dark.
Very, very, and yes, indeed, very.
And the reason,
kind of a theme for this episode.
Yeah. I love that we bounce around a lot. And, we went from last week's comedies to this week's dystopian nightmares.
Hell yeah.
And what makes this movie interesting and what complicates Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character's life, which, funny enough, the guy's name is Joe in this movie. So that must have been... I always wonder if it's a lot easier to be on set as an actor when you're playing the role of your name. Like
I would feel like it would be.
Right? Like Grandma's Boy last week. They're calling him Dante. The guy's name's Peter Dante,
Peter
right?
Dante. Right, yeah.
It's got to be easier.
There's no difference, really.
Yeah. And so, yes, his name is Joe in this movie, which is perfect. The problem is that he does get his loop transported back in time. He does get his future self transported back to him. And he needs to close his loop. But his future self is played by Bruce Willis.
Yep.
As we all know, Bruce Willis is a badass.
Yeah.
And he completely ruins Joe's plans.
Oh, it's so great the way he does it, too.
I love this scene. And I love the chemistry between these two guys, because if you could talk to yourself 30 years in the past, I'm sure all of us, especially in our teens and 20s, we were complete know-it-alls, right? We were
sure.
Obnoxious. We were insufferable. I'm sure I'd want to tell my younger punk self to shut the hell up, as much as Bruce Willis does in this movie.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I love that.
And so Joe now has to go find and close his loop for his future self, because his employers are now really pissed.
Rightfully so. Yeah, because you're not supposed to let your self go.
Exactly. That is a new way for us to describe plots of our movies in this podcast. But, that was such great script writing, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt did such a good job. While I was watching the movie, I was like, this is how our audience gets to know what Looper's about.
Yeah, it's not a bad way to go.
Thanks. The other part of this movie that I really like that kind of reminded me of a lighter time travel movie is that, unlike Back to the Future, there is not a time paradox because future self and current self met. Because
that's
remember,
right. Yeah.
Doc Brown always warns Marty. He's like, never run into your past self. It could create a time paradox.
That's right. Yeah, that's actually a good point.
And Emily Blunt is in this movie. She is just a civilian who Joe runs into while he's trying to not only escape this mob, but also track down his future self. She's great in this movie. She's vulnerable, but also a badass, which is a good combination. I really like what she's doing in this movie and how she tries to protect herself and her young son named Sid.
Yes.
Who is a phenomenal child actor.
Yeah, the kid was really good.
He was so good in this movie. Really impressive in especially the intense scenes of this movie. His name is Pierce Gagnon. He was in Tomorrowland, but I never saw that movie. It's with George Clooney.
I have seen Tomorrowland. I actually have the Blu-ray of it. Tomorrowland is a very underrated, cool-ass flick.
Oh, you should add it to our list then.
I might have to, yeah. Brad Bird is the writer-director on that one, and it's George Clooney. Hugh Laurie's in it. It is. My wife and I were big fans of it when we saw it. I think I've seen it like 3 or 4 times at this point.
Okay, he plays Nate Newton in Tomorrowland.
I remember him in that movie. Nice. I haven't watched it in a while, I'll be honest, but it's a cool ass movie.
Nice. And so the supporting characters really help this movie along, but again, this is really about Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Bruce Willis facing off, and they both do it so well.
Yeah, they do.
Both very strong actors.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, they played off each other as each other very well.
Exactly. And so the way they can do this actually is that Joseph Gordon-Levitt actually wore some prosthetics. He wore a fake nose to really mimic Bruce Willis's nose. And there's a point where they're both shown facing off against each other, and it's their profile. And you're like, oh yeah, they totally have the same nose in this moment.
Definitely. Yeah.
He looks a bit different where you're like, how do I put my finger on this? Why does he look a little bit weird? In the beginning, you're like, Joseph Gordon-Levitt looks a little weird. It's because he's wearing blue contacts.
Yeah.
His eyes are naturally brown. Bruce Willis's are blue, and so he wears blue contacts. But once you realize that, you're like, oh, okay, so he's a dark-haired guy with blue eyes. That's fine.
Yeah.
And so then it totally makes sense, and you can move on. But especially for people who have watched Joseph Gordon-Levitt before, there's a bit of a moment where you do a double take at the beginning of this movie. You're like, oh, why does he look like that? And then you get it, which is fine, and then you move on. It's not as distracting as the dental piece for Bohemian Rhapsody, I promise.
That's for sure.
And so you would recognize Joseph Gordon-Levitt, of course, from Third Rock from the Sun, that great 90s show.
That show is so goddamn funny.
It still is.
Every episode, and it does hold up.
It really does.
And it was only like 3 or 4 seasons, so sad. But my God, what another show that was so ahead of its time.
It absolutely was, yes. And he's great in it.
That show is so goddamn funny.
He's the young kid in it with the long hair, and that's the first time I saw Joseph Gordon-Levitt. He was total cutie.
Oh, really? Mine was Angels in the Outfield.
I saw Angels in the Outfield when I was like 13 or so, which is why I saw it after Third Rock from the Sun. But yes, he was great in that. And speaking of Doc Brown, Christopher Lloyd is in Angels in the Outfield.
Christopher Lloyd is in Angels in the Outfield. And Danny Glover.
Yeah.
And Tony Danza. And Matthew McConaughey. And Adrian Brody.
Oh my God. I saw that movie once. You know that movie better than I.
I have the VHS copy of Angels in the Outfield. No one can see me or hear me but you. Yeah, I like that movie. Still pretty entertaining.
He also wrote and directed an independent film called Don John.
Yeah, I saw that one.
And Scarlett Johansson's in that movie. It's a very good movie.
It is a good movie. It's a funny story about that movie. I rented it when Amy was staying with me when we first started dating. And Joel and I were like, dude, let's watch Don John. Joel, I'm going to go rent it on Redbox. And I was like, Amy, are you cool with watching Don John? It's got Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Scarlett Johansson. And the opening credits were just pornographic.
Porn. Yeah.
And I was like, well, I knew that he was a womanizer in the movie. I didn't know it had to do with porn addiction.
Yes.
So do you still want to watch this? Are you all right? And Amy was fine, and she ended up liking the movie too. And it is a good movie. Julianne Moore's in it too.
Yeah, it is certainly not a movie we'd watch with our grandmas.
Oh, most definitely not. No.
He then was in a movie called 50-50 with Seth Rogen.
Great movie.
Which is great. He's diagnosed with cancer, and it's a great film.
Based on a true story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good one.
He is in The Dark Knight Rises.
Yes.
Which is not a very good movie.
No, it's not a very good movie.
And he actually plays a cop and interacts a lot with Christian Bale's Batman in that movie.
Yes, he does. Yes.
He's in Lincoln.
Oh, that's right. He's Lincoln's son, right?
Yeah, he's Robert Lincoln.
Wow. I remember I saw Lincoln twice, and I really like Lincoln. It's just not one that I would be like, let's watch Lincoln.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those slow burn movies. It's not one when you're in the mood to watch a lot of movies, you're like, oh yeah, let's put that on. It's
definitely
more of a cerebral,
an afternoon movie.
Yeah, kind of a more of a quiet evening.
Sure.
You know what? It's a red wine movie.
It is a red wine movie. Yeah, I like that.
He, of course, is in Inception.
Absolutely.
And he is in one of the coolest scenes ever, which is where he's fighting a guy in a hallway, and the hallway starts spinning, and so they're fighting on the walls, and it's so fucking cool. And watching the behind the scenes of that is also very cool.
Oh, hell yeah. The practicality of Nolan.
Mm-hmm. He starred in 500 Days of Summer.
Oh, I really like that movie.
I love that movie, except for a whole bunch of guys that took the exact wrong message from that movie. Similar to Wolf of Wall Street. They venerate and really put the leads on pedestals from both those movies. I'm like, that wasn't the message at all, actually. We're not supposed to look up to either of these guys.
Right.
And of course, my all-time favorites of his, he's in 10 Things I Hate About You.
Yeah. I like 10 Things I Hate About You. That's still a good movie.
It is.
David Krumholtz is in that movie, too.
He is. God, I loved him in that movie when he's driving his little scooter.
Oh, yeah. My balls!
When he runs off the cliff. God.
Yeah. So fucking
good.
funny.
David Krumholtz is great.
Definitely.
And, of course, Bruce Willis, who we've spoken about before. My pick for the Christmas episodes, Die Hard was my pick. He, of course, was also in, and I'm just going to fire these off, Pulp Fiction, The Sixth Sense, Sin City.
Hell yeah.
Red.
He's in Red? Oh, that's right.
He's the lead in Red.
Yeah, he is the lead in Red. Yeah.
And Red, too.
Yes.
The Fifth Element, Armageddon.
Yeah, Armageddon.
And, of course, I cannot talk about Bruce Willis without mentioning this movie because it is such an underrated movie, and I hope all of our listeners watch this movie. It was my pick for episode 5. It is Lucky Number 11.
Oh, hell yeah.
Love that movie.
So good, Mr. Good Cat.
And as I mentioned, Emily Blunt is in this movie. She appeared in our episode 33 where I discussed Edge of Tomorrow.
Hell yeah.
She's also in The Devil Wears Prada, and we talked about her a lot in our Oscars for Kids episode because she is Mary Poppins in Mary Poppins Returns.
Yes, indeed, which I did end up watching about 2 weeks after our Oscars for Kids episode, and it's a sweet, fun time. Yeah, you should check it out.
Okay, I will at some point. I do have Disney Plus, so I don't have an excuse.
Yeah, there you go.
Paul Dano is also in this movie. He's one of Joe's friends.
Oh, my God. Oh, you know, it's funny. Every time I watch Looper, I've only watched Looper, I think, maybe 6 times in my life, but I always forget about Paul Dano's character.
Do I. Same.
Yeah, I always do.
Right?
And, oh, man. I didn't like him for a long time. I never liked that movie Little Miss Sunshine, but then I saw There Will Be Blood, and I was like, holy mother of God, Paul Dano's awesome. And then, of course, the Batman. Jesus, what a terrifying Riddler he was.
Yes, he was, and those are the movies that I remember him from as well. And
Yeah.
I will never forget the scene in There Will Be Blood where Daniel Day-Lewis is yelling at him, "I drink from your milkshake."
Yeah.
God, that's so intense.
That scene's nuts. The scene that got me to actually kind of fall in love with Dano in There Will Be Blood was when he is doing his sermon.
Yes.
And like walks out of the church, and then Daniel Plainview comes in and he starts slapping him. And he's like, like, I've abandoned my child.
Yes.
And like, oh my God. It's just, There Will Be Blood is a masterful movie, and that's on my list at some point. It has to be.
That's good because I've only seen it once.
Oh, I saw it twice in theaters, like back to back. Like I literally went one night and then I went the night after.
I watched it with my sister, and at the end of it, we both turned to each other and we said, I hated that movie. But I was in my early 20s, and I'm really curious because I don't remember a ton of the movie.
Sure.
I'm really curious if watching it now in my 30s, I'll have a totally different opinion.
Well, it'll be on the list at some point, so
Sweet.
we'll get that opportunity.
Great. And lastly, another person in this movie, one of the head mobsters in this movie is Jeff Daniels,
Yes.
who, of course, was in Dumb and Dumber, one of your all-time favorite comedies.
Harry Dunn, baby.
He is in the Matt Damon movie The Martian.
Yes, he is.
He's the head of NASA. I loved him in that role.
So good.
He also has probably my all-time favorite monologue in history,
Wow.
The Newsroom.
Oh, I've never seen that show.
It was a really good show, but it's the first episode, and he's in this college Q&A talk, and this college student is asking this panel, and there's a conservative, there's a liberal, and then there's him who's a political journalist, and she's like, what makes America the greatest country in the world? And of course, each of the political people are like, oh, it's the freedom, and of course the conservative and liberal people have different answers, but they say
Right.
that. And Jeff Daniels goes on this rant about the problems in America and asking, why are we so arrogant thinking that we're number one in the world? And he just lists off like all the statistics, and he just goes off, and all the students just start filming him on their phones and stuff. And it's such an incredible monologue, and he's so good at it. Feel free to pull that up on YouTube anytime.
It's
Jeff,
on HBO, I think.
It
right?
is,
was
yeah.
HBO, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's been a series that I have been wanting to watch. It's Aaron Sorkin, so it's definitely something that I
and that's
need
why,
to digest.
yeah, that's why it's one of the best scripts. But anybody can just go ahead and look up the Newsroom monologue on YouTube, and just that scene will pop up, and that
Nice.
in and of itself is worth watching. It's so good. So yeah, that's one of my favorite parts that he's ever played.
Awesome.
And then he was in Pleasantville, which is a movie I don't think about very often.
I don't either. I didn't like Pleasantville. I don't know. There was something weird about it.
I thought it was really sweet, though I haven't seen it in a long time. Tobey Maguire and Reese Witherspoon.
Yep, and Paul Walker. I haven't seen.
Oh, that's right. Paul Walker's in it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it since I was in college. It was one of those movies that the teacher was in
Of course.
class was like, this movie, da, 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 da. I was like, when you're forced to watch movies, sometimes you don't enjoy them.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that might have been that kind of situation. So maybe I need to give Pleasantville another shot.
It was like when we were back in high school and we were forced to read books. That
Exactly,
immediately
yeah.
made us hate them.
Oh, yeah. And now I'm in the middle of 3 books. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And Jeff Daniels is also in the live-action Disney remake of 101 Dalmatians,
Yeah, he is.
which is
That's
a
right.
good live-action remake, by the way.
It's not a bad one. Yeah.
I know we hate a lot on Disney live-action remakes, but that one was good. I mean, Glenn Close as
Oh, yeah,
Cruella
she was
DeVille.
great.
Come on.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
And Jolie Richardson
Oh,
as Anita
loved her.
Darling. So good.
So good.
yes.
And lastly, Speed.
Is he in Speed?
He is Keanu Reeves' partner,
Oh,
Harry,
wow.
in Speed.
No way. That's cool.
Yeah. He's
I guess I got to see Speed
Remember?
again. It's been a while. No, it's been a while.
Don't shoot the hostage. He fucking shoots him.
No, I don't remember that at all.
It's so good. It's so good. So that is the cast of Looper. Great cast.
Hell yeah.
And for anybody who was following along last week, you heard us mention Rain Johnson, and that this is one of the few movies of his that we like.
Yes.
He is usually a combo writer and director, similar to some of the other directors we've spoken about in the past, including Billy Wilder.
Yeah.
He wrote and directed Knives Out and Glass Onion, those 2 Netflix movies.
Yes. Which I have to see Glass Onion still.
You do. That is better. He created Poker Face, this new series with Natasha Lyonne on Peacock that came out this year that myself and everyone who I've spoken to about it love. It's
wow.
Great series for anyone who streams Peacock. Go ahead and give it a watch.
Interesting.
He directed The Last Jedi, which both John and I aren't huge fans of.
Nope, not at all.
However, and this might make you respect Rian Johnson a little more, he directed 3 episodes of Breaking Bad.
Did he really?
He directed the Fly episode.
Oh, wow.
He directed 51, which was about Walt's 51st birthday, which was also very good.
Hmm.
And he also directed Ozymandias, the only episode ever rated 10 out of 10 on IMDb.
No way.
Yeah.
Crazy. I had no idea.
After reading about that, I actually have a little bit more respect for Rian Johnson, so there you go.
Breaking Bad was a good show. Definitely.
It definitely was, from start to finish.
Yes.
Now, this movie came out in 2012. It was featured on the 2010 Blacklist.
No kidding.
Yeah, this screenplay was floating around for a little while before it was made. I didn't know that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I guess, well, this was his second movie, technically, right? Wasn't it?
I think it was his third.
Well, he did Brick, and then...
He did the Brothers Bloom as well, and then he did some TV stuff.
Oh, wow. I have seen Brothers Bloom.
Yeah. Oh, well, what'd you think?
It's okay.
Okay. Well, he did that. And clearly this screenplay was good, and everybody was talking about it because Emily Blunt agreed to star in the movie after only reading half the script. She said she didn't even need to read more of it before accepting the role.
Very cool.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, speaking of time travel and Emily Blunt, this is the second of 3 films that she stars in which involve time travel.
Really?
Yep. So there's Edge of Tomorrow, which I covered.
Yes.
There's this movie, which we're discussing. Yeah. There's one more that she starred in that is completely forgotten.
Oh.
It stars Jason Bourne.
Oh, The Adjustment Bureau.
The Adjustment Bureau with Matt Damon, that is right.
That movie's badass.
That movie is really great, and I totally forget about that movie all the time, and nobody has ever really seen it, and I think we should add it to the list. It's really good.
Yeah, it's a good movie. My parents call that movie the Hat Guy movie.
Yes, exactly. That is a great descriptor.
Yeah. No, that movie's bitchin'. Isn't John Slattery in that, I think, from Mad Men?
Yes.
I think he's like one of the head
guys. He's the
Yeah.
silver-haired guy. Yeah.
Yes. Adjustment Bureau is badass. Definitely.
Yeah, we need to add that to the list. And then we'll have covered all of Emily Blunt's time travel movies.
Hell yeah. Until the next one.
Exactly. I'm sure
Watch A Quiet Place 3 back in time.
Exactly. And in this movie, Joe is seen studying French, and he's got this cute little, headset, and he's just repeating the audio prompts that he's getting. He's not great at it, but he's trying.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is that Joseph Gordon-Levitt is fluent in French in real life.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's cool.
That was cool, yeah.
Oh, isn't that an Easter egg in 10 Things I Hate About You then?
Thank you. That was my next piece of trivia, because this is the second movie that he is trying to learn French, the first one being 10 Things I Hate About You. Nicely done.
Yes, he wants to tutor Alex Mack.
That's right.
If anybody remembers the show Alex Mack on Nickelodeon, Larissa, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, and I still don't know.
Me either,
but yeah, she was the one in 10 Things I Hate About You that was on The Secret World of Alex Mack on Nickelodeon in the 90s.
And I always love when you see actors in real life going on the press tour for different movies, and they go to different countries, and then all of a sudden they're just speaking that language, and they have a full interview in that language.
Right.
Bradley Cooper does it. He has French interviews that are awesome to watch.
Oh, wow.
Ben Affleck actually is fluent in Spanish and is very good at it. He speaks way better Spanish than Jennifer Lopez, by the way. It's so fun to watch actors speak in different languages when they go on the press tours. I always thought that was such a little interesting tidbit.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. Speaking of Ben Affleck, there's a new movie with him coming out that I'm excited about, with Robert Rodriguez at the directing chair again, called Hypnotic.
Oh.
Saw the trailer before Pope's Exorcist. But back to Looper.
That's okay. There's a new movie coming out with him and Matt Damon pairing up again called Air that I want to see.
Oh, yeah. Air is actually, I think, in theaters now.
That's right. Yeah, it just came out just recently.
Yes.
Now, you and I both are big fans of watches.
Yes.
Joe has a gorgeous pocket watch in this movie.
Oh, yes. I love it. Oh, I love it.
It's an example of a long case Turkish market clock.
Nice.
featuring Ottoman numerals, which the whole watch is just a beautiful work of art.
Yeah, it really is. I love every close-up of that pocket watch, and I'm just like, oh, like salivating.
Yes, and it's a great prop that really pulls us back every time to the theme of time in this movie. I really like the use of that practical prop for it.
Hell yeah.
There's a scene which Joe falls off a fire escape when he's trying to escape some hitmen.
He's on a fire escape trying to escape?
That's right.
Whoa.
He's using it for its intended purpose.
Yes, indeed.
Now, that was filmed on his 30th birthday.
Oh, cool.
And the crew left him hanging on his stunt wires, and they all gathered around him and sang happy birthday.
Oh, that's neat.
And wheeled out a big old birthday cake for him.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Must have been a fun day.
Yeah, I thought that was really sweet. And lastly, not only was Joseph Gordon-Levitt fitted with prosthetics to more closely resemble Bruce Willis, he also watched a ton of his movies.
Yes.
To pick up a lot of his mannerisms. And Bruce Willis then is quoted on saying he absolutely recognized himself in Joseph Gordon-Levitt's portrayal in this movie.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, so he did a great job.
Definitely.
As I said, it came out in 2012. The budget for this movie, actually, funny enough, even though it is 17 years after your film was made, it had just about the same budget as yours. Its budget was $30 million.
Oh, wow. Very cool. Wow. That's kind of surprising.
Yeah. Of course, $30 million these days doesn't go as far, but...
No. Apparently went far enough with Looper, though. That's good.
It did. And in the U.S., it grossed $66 million, which is not bad. It's not terrible.
No, not bad.
But worldwide, it grossed $176 million.
Nice.
Which is...
Hell yeah.
Really great. Made me very happy.
Yeah, that's great. That's actually just about 10 million more than mine grossed worldwide.
Yeah,
so,
really similar.
Cool.
So Bruce Willis can make lower budgeted, really successful time travel movies.
Hell yeah, he can.
And right now, if you want to watch it, Looper is available on Prime Video.
Oh, very cool. I watched my DVD copy.
Awesome.
Yes. I definitely like that movie. I remember seeing it in theaters, and my dad and I both were like, hell yeah, this movie's badass. And then I bought it for him, and I think he bought it for me. So we each had a
nice.
copy. Yeah, it's a good movie. Definitely a great choice to go with 12 Monkeys.
Thank you, and also thank you for picking 12 Monkeys. It made me watch it again. And
oh, yeah.
Even though it's a traumatic movie, it is so good.
Yes.
And definitely a crafted piece of cinema.
Hell yeah. Good stuff. Good episode. Good movies.
Thank you, friend.
Yeah. I hope everybody else had a good time.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
So, V, would you watch Looper with your grandma?
You know, I would, actually. I don't think she'd be a huge fan of it because it is a sci-fi film, but even though it's rated R, there's only a little bit of gore.
Yeah.
There's very little nudity, just a topless woman in one shot. Oh,
that's right. Yeah,
that's it.
Right.
There is some violence, but it's not over the top.
No.
This movie is more dystopian and intense.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And dystopian in a way that it kind of reminded me of Interstellar, because a big chunk of this movie is in...
a cornfield.
A cornfield, yeah, sugarcane field, actually. But just seems a little desperate, a little, Dust Bowl-y. It just kind of reminded me of the same feel of just bleakness.
Sure.
That the beginning of Interstellar had. So yeah, I definitely think like mid-teens could totally watch this movie and not only understand it, but not be traumatized by it either.
I completely agree with that. Yeah, 2012, let's see, it's 2023. This movie is 11 years old, so I was in my mid to late 20s, but I feel like if it had come out when I was in my teenage years, I would have seen it also.
Totally, yeah. I mean, it's a bit of an action movie, it's a bit of a sci-fi movie, but it's not... It doesn't lean into any specific category too much.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And John, would you watch your movie with your grandma?
Yeah, I think I might have.
She would like that movie.
Yeah, I think my grandma, if I recall, I did watch it with her at one point, some Christmas or something like that.
She liked twisted horror movies.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, grandma's good times.
I think late teens could watch 12 Monkeys. It's pretty fucked up.
It is definitely fucked up, and again, I saw it when I was like 12.
Yeah.
So it's been with me for a long time, and I'm glad that it has been with me for this long because I love this movie. So I think, yeah, maybe like 13, 14.
Oh, I was thinking like 17.
Oh, well.
Well, there's also a lot to understand and follow
yeah, there's
in this
a lot
movie.
to, yeah. What are you saying? I couldn't grasp it when I was
No,
12?
not at all. No.
Jeez, Wow.
No. I'm just saying this is why you're a bit twisted, is because you watched movies like this when you were 12.
Right.
But I think I might have seen this once with my dad when I was a teenager still living at home.
Yeah.
I definitely saw it with my older sister Shannon. Like I said, she introduced me to it. But yeah, it's an intense film for sure.
Hell yeah. But it's so good.
But
Again,
it's so
like
good.
we've been saying for the last however many minutes.
Worth saying over and over again because it is a great film. So that about does it for this episode. Thanks, everyone.
That about wraps her on up.
We do have a new review.
Oh, yeah.
That we are so stoked by.
Very excited.
This is by VL Grand. Thank you so much for giving us a shout out. And the review says, "So great. I don't remember how I came across this podcast, but I'm so glad I did. I'm a movie fan myself, and I love having new movie recommendations from two other fans who have experience behind the scenes. Even if said movies don't quite pique your interests, at least listen to John and Vee's takes on them. They are fun to listen to."
Oh, very cool. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, VL Grand. Really appreciate it. That was awesome.
Yeah, and do hit us up with your address if you'd like a sticker.
We would love to send you one.
And send us a recommendation or two if you've got some.
And speaking of which, John, do you want to tell our listeners what next week's episode is all about?
Yeah, we're going to jump into the recommendations from two of the winners that we chose for the comment sticker situation. And the one that I'm going to go with is from Morgan. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure who Morgan is.
Morgan is one of our early listeners and an old
wonderful
coworker of mine, actually.
Oh, well, fantastic. Thank you for listening and throwing out some suggestions. Their suggestion was the Viggo Mortensen-led film Captain Fantastic, which I have never seen. I heard a lot of good things about. He was nominated for an Oscar for this film, so I'm definitely looking forward to it. I usually do like Viggo Mortensen, so we'll see how that goes. So thank you very much, Morgan, for showing us this movie. And for those that want to follow along and watch Captain Fantastic with us for next week, it is streaming on Amazon Prime.
Yes, thank you everyone who has submitted reviews so far. These are our two winners from our contests for submitting reviews, and we will do this again in the future. So if you want one of your recommendations picked, or if you want to be a winner of a contest, please write us a review. Geology Guy, don't worry. If you do reach out to us in the future, we still will honor your original winning of this contest. No worries there. Feel free, if you get a chance, to shoot us your recommendation of a movie as well. But in the meantime, I am doing Monty's pick, one of our first listeners. He had a great couple of recommendations, and we have settled on The Wizard of Oz.
Ooh. If ever there was, there was. I haven't seen The Wizard of Oz in quite some time.
Me either. So this is going to be interesting because neither of us has seen Captain Fantastic, and it's been, I would say, decades since either of us saw Wizard of Oz.
Oh, I wouldn't say decades. I would say
for
maybe
me it is
5 years.
Oh,
yeah.
It's been decades for me then.
Okay, yeah. Now, I've got like a very special commemorative VHS release of The Wizard of Oz with like a 35-page booklet attached to it and another copy of it on VHS. So I have 2 copies of Wizard of Oz on VHS,
Of course you
actually.
do. But
yeah, I don't have any disc copies. I don't know if I ever would, but we'll find out after we watch it this time.
But since you and none of our audience have VCRs anymore, you can watch The Wizard of Oz if you have an HBO Max subscription.
Perfect, which is where I will watch it.
Yes, same.
I imagine there will be a 4K transfer of that coming out soon, because it's one of those movies that... Yeah, like we talked about in the past, I think last week, that one shot where she opens the door. I know how they did that shot, and I'm sure you'll give that information out when we discuss it next week.
Absolutely, and it's interesting. We just mentioned Pleasantville for the first time in our podcast, and made me think of it.
Right.
Similar effects.
A little bit, yeah.
Well, that's our episode this week. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. We hope you had as much fun discussing time travel as we did.
Yes.
And as we mentioned, please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. It is so helpful as we continue to produce this weekly show for ourselves and all of you.
Yes, of course. Please do all of the above. And as always, we like to sign off here at Movies You Miss Podcast with film as a form of art. And in art, all opinions are valid, except if you think
there is any wrong way to tell a time travel story in movies.
Ah, cool. I already have my next time travel film picked out, and it's a foreign time travel film.
Ooh.
And yeah, it's actually a really badass movie. So we'll do that later, but it's going to be fun.
Yeah, we have 12 Monkeys, and on the other end of the spectrum, we have Back to the Future. We've talked about Frequency. There are so many different ways to discuss time travel, and since it hasn't been invented yet or is part of the scientific theory,
yes,
you can make up whatever the hell you want.
That's exactly right, and that's why time travel movies are so awesome.
That's right.
All right, well, thank you guys very much for tuning in. Cheers, everybody.
Bye-bye.